James Gunn's first entry into the live action arm of his DC universe is finally here. Superman has hit theaters, but is it any good? This is our spoiler filled review of Superman. If you have not seen it yet, we are not holding back. Do yourself a favor, go see this movie for yourself. Do not let me or anyone else spoil this movie for you. I personally saw it in IMAX, so go out, watch the movie, come back, and let's talk about it. So, was this movie any good? Long story short, absolutely. This Superman is everything that I was looking for out of the new version of Superman. This is a Superman and a Lex and a DC universe for a whole new generation. This Superman gave me Christopher Reeves vibes. This may be the best Superman movie that there has been. This is a great combo of the sci-fi elements of Superman and the humanitarian aspects of Superman. I love the setup. I love that this is an active world. I love that metas have existed for a very long time. And I love the fact that we did not get the baby coming to Earth from Krypton and landing in Smallville because we simply don't need it. Most people know the origin story of Superman. And if you're going to go that route, where you are explaining Superman, then you are sacking a good 30 to 40 minutes of this movie. And let me just say this is a lot of movie. 2 hours and 9 minutes jammed to the rafters with stuff and activity and action and different things going on. And that is exactly what this movie needed to be because James Gunn is setting up a DC universe that is active, that is lived in, that is already moving. We're going to have a Batman who's middle aged, who's working alongside Damian Wayne. We're going to be living in this world that already has superhero teams and is bigger than just the origin of the heroic age. And it fits for DC canon. In the lore of DC, Superman is not the first meta to hit the scene. He's generally accepted as the first of what's known as the heroic age because he was the first published. But that's not always the case, not in every single continuity. And sometimes it works better to have him not be the first because you can still make him a paragon of virtue to older, more established heroes and still have him stand for everything that he stands for without him being the very first one. And I think this Superman, as well as this Clark, is played wonderfully in that vein, where we have a self assured Superman. This is not a Superman who is sitting in the dark, listening to The Cure, smoking cigarettes, and pondering the meaning of life. This is a Superman who is trying to do right. This is a Superman who is confident in what he believes in the ideals that he stands for, but we see as the movie is developing that he's only a couple years into his journey, which means he's not the weathered, seasoned Superman who has all of these years or all of these decades under his belt. He is still coming to grips with what does it mean to be who he is in a world that can be cynical or dark or questioning or complicated. And that is the blend. That is the blend that still allows for hope to shine through. That hope isn't also distorted by the darkness. That hope stands in juxtaposition to the darkness, exists within the darkness, and shines brightest in the context where it doesn't make sense for hope to exist, or that there's every single reason why hope shouldn't exist. And so I love the fact that the very beginning, just in a couple of sentences, establishes the world that we're in, and we immediately get crypto. We immediately get the fortress. We immediately get his biological parents, and we immediately get the world that we are in, including Nicholas Holt's Lex Luthor. I need to talk about Lex for a second. Gene Hackman, wonderful Lex. But generally, Lex has always been better on the small screen, either animated or live action. I could rattle off at least three versions of Lex that tend to sit in my top three, and they're all on the small screen. Nicholas Holt has defined for a generation how to play Lex. He is chewing the scenery. He is overacting in a larger than life sense, but that's who Lex Luthor is, especially in a world where he isn't as experienced. They seem to be playing him in the same vein that they're playing Superman. We have to remember where we're sitting at in the timeline. If Superman is only 3 years in, there's nothing that says that this is a 50-plus-year-old Lex Luthor or this very well worn Lex Luthor. He's played in a way where all of the character beats are there, but there's so much room to grow in gravity, in poise, in strategy. But we need to start someplace. And this was an amazing place to start. Likewise, crypto. I legit did not expect as much crypto as we got, and I absolutely loved it. I think he was such a huge part of why this movie was amazing, because he acted as this catalyst for the ridiculous nature and the comic book nature of this movie. Because let's face facts, this was a comic book brought onto the big screen. This was unashamed to be everything that it was. When you get all of the different reactions to crypto, including Superman's, that really allows for a lot of development of this weird and wild world that we're establishing. And that's the thing about this movie. I fundamentally believe that there will be some people who will watch this movie and say, nope, bridge too far. Nope, this is too much. Nope, this is too much of a mess. Because James Gunn isn't holding back. He's coming out swinging and saying, this is the world that we are establishing. This is the world that this Superman and this DC universe is living within. And if you have a hard time accepting that, you are going to struggle with this movie. This is not going to be for you. If you are looking for a comic book brought to life, this is right up your lane. But a comic book brought to life that still echoes sentiments that are modern, even if it is leaning into some of the golden age and silver age aspects of Superman. And the reality is that there are elements of both that are unfortunately still resonant today. So we didn't need to get a baby launched to Earth. We didn't need to get the origin story. All of that was handled immediately and then set into a world that is moving and has action happening where Superman is on the back foot. He's getting beat up. He's lost. And we immediately get him getting healed. We are immediately get the setting that all of this stuff exists, and then we're back to the races, and he's fighting the Hammer of Bravia. And that whole thing, setting up the ongoing threat that is, I struggle to say a B plot because there are several main plots that all kind of coalesce into the big climactic ending. It sets the table to ask a heavy question. What are the ramifications of a superpowered being getting involved in national politics? What does it mean to live in one country, say that you are acting of your own accord and causing international issue? See, I don't think that there's a problem with asking those questions because, for as much as some folks balk at the idea of comic book movies being political or having political stories, I'm gonna have to point you to my Golden Age Superman video. That there is a long history of politics or social commentary in comics, starting from the origin of the Big Blue Boy Scout, and it's not just on the DC side. The first cover of Captain America had him punching Hitler in the face before the main conflict kicked off. So it makes all of the sense in the world to ask those big questions, especially when you start to involve the fact that we are utilizing this to tell an immigrant story. And that makes sense for Superman's character because he's not in, or he's not from Earth. And so he is the immigrant story. He was written by two Jewish American writers and creators that understood the immigrant story. And so all of this is going on, the fight's going on. We get the engineer who's been dispatched to find the fortress, which leads them to be able to access it and uncover the message from Clark's parents. And they've toyed around with this in the past. I don't mind that because I don't think we need to prescribe the same morality to Clark's parents as we do to Clark. And in all actuality, and we see this further on in the movie, I think it's more impactful when you have a Superman who has been told by his parents, you are going to be stronger than everybody else. So lead them because they are weak. And maybe this is part of my cynical nature coming out because I do fundamentally believe that humans can be very weak. But I think it makes more sense and tells more about the character of Superman to have this character choose to do right, to have this character choose the path that speaks to his morality and his beliefs rather than, oh, it's genetic or, oh, it's a family trait. It is a family trait, but it's not a family trait in the classical sense from his biological family. This is a family trait that has been learned by the people that raised him. So coming out of all of this, we get the setup for Lois and Clark with the interview. And we saw bits and pieces of the interview in the trailer. I love that she knows who he is. Again, this goes with the baby from Krypton thing. I don't think we need to spend any of the movie trying to get these two together or trying to establish that she knows. I think it's better overall for her to understand this is all of him. And again, it speaks to his trusting nature to say, hey, I care for you, so I'm going to trust you with my identity. And I love the back and forth chemistry between these two. I love that it showcases the idealistic nature of Superman that's rooted in hope and decency, juxtaposed against her cynical, questioning nature. It doesn't put one over the other, but one is a great foil for the other, where she's talking about being punk rock because she questions everything, because she doesn't trust. And he's talking about being punk rock because of his kindness and because his nature truly is countercultural. And I do think that it makes sense to have this conflict between the two of them as the interview is going on, because this is how a real reporter who questions everything, that is cynical, that is hard hitting, would act in comparison to him interviewing himself and asking softball questions. Again, all of these things are hinting at notes that are from the early comics, where he is almost playing that Peter Parker role, where he is showcasing himself and showcasing himself in the best light. I love that as these two are talking later on in the movie, there is an interdimensional imp, which would absolutely love if we got Mixospitalik in this universe. But that little drop to it was an interdimensional imp. I'm just saying that would be phenomenal. But this is a world of kaiju. This is a world of interdimensional imps. And we get the Justice Gang. And I'm into it. It's all very comic book. And Mr. Terrific steals the show. And each one of these individual pieces helps to establish that there are other superhero teams that exist that choose to do things differently, that don't think about the greater good. And I got Superman versus the Elite vibes from all of that. I got this idea where Superman is showcasing the better way of doing it. And so this broadcast goes out of Superman's parents going into the whole message, and I love that it's not just fabricated, that they actually restore the full thing, and that Lex has this pocket universe, and in that pocket universe is Element Man. And the fact that this is all a setup for the public turning on Superman, looking to other heroes, showcasing the cynicism and distrust of humanity. And then Superman goes banana cakes looking for his dog. How human is that? And then turns himself in to find Crypto and wins over Element Man because of his nature, because of who he is, and speaks to his humanity over everything else. Again, this is comic book Superman, and unashamedly so. Lois and Terrific help save Clark and and Element Man with his kid, and it is wonderfully done, especially with Mr. Terrific and Crypto going after his T spheres. The whole thing is so masterfully done. And after this, after he's been rejected by society, after he's been beat up and he's at his lowest, this is where we get his parents. This is where we get Ma and Pa Kent. Shout out to Jonathan Kent for surviving the Superman movie. And in all of this, he's reminded that what he chooses to do is what dictates what kind of man he is. His choices matter more than a message from his parents. And that's how Ma and Pa Kent should be shown. That's how Clark, specifically Clark, with his parents, should be shown. And no, I don't think we need to get the heart attack scene as the inciting event to spin Superman into becoming who he is. I think we can just get meaningful scenes between those two. And so there's this subplot that they're trying to figure out exactly what the story is behind this message, and we get Jimmy getting secret plans from Eve about Lex trying to become a dictator, which again makes all of the sense in the world, which all comes to this final battle where they are trying to close the rift, and they are trying to stop Lex, and they are trying to stop Ultraman, who is a clone of Clark. I've heard some people complaining about how this is bizarro. Who knows what James Gunn is going to do? Just let him cook. Let's not nitpick the crap out of this thing, because who knows? Maybe he goes to a parallel Earth and puts together the crime syndicate. Maybe he does take the mantle of Bizarro. The reality is, even with Marvel and their cinematic universe, not everything is one for one from the comics. So let's let the story develop before we go crazy nitpicking it, because there are so many wins with all of this. So, with the help of the Justice Gang, they save the day. The Daily Planet exposes Lex, they clear Superman's name, and Superman gives this inspiring speech about what it means to be uniquely human. Superman stands out as the one going against the grain because of his kindness. He is the one that stands against the easy option of devolving into what society or what is easiest dictates you should be. You fight fire with fire, but he chooses a different path. He chooses his own way, even down to his language being old timey in the midst of an edgier world. And that is perfect. Superman is very deliberately standing in juxtaposition to these other characters in a way that does bring about tough questions, but tough questions bring out sharp answers. Yes, this is a story about power and privilege. Yes, this is a story about an immigrant and trying to find his place in the world. And I know some people aren't going to like this movie because it chooses to comment on oppression. I understand that some people are going to say that this is woke because it tells an immigrant story and some level of politics. But dating back to the 30s, Superman has always meant to be a champion of the oppressed. That is Superman's role. That was what he was created to be. And yeah, we should be looking at the world in the sense of humans rather than citizens of different countries. So, all in all, I think this is everything that it needed to be. I think this had so much heart. I think this had characters that were fantastic. I loved Guy Gardner. I loved Mr. Terrific. I loved Lois. I loved Perry. I loved that the Daily Planet was also a thing, that Clark has a presence as his own character. I love all of it because it's Superman. And it's a story that is highlighting the fact that we are together humans and that kindness matters, that standing up for virtue and honesty matters. And it opens the door for a wider DC universe to start to take shape, to start to develop. And I loved the two closing credits. I love the shot of Crypto and Superman. I loved the scene where Superman wakes up after the kryptonite poisoning, and Crypto is laying on top of him, sleeping on top of him. Absolutely love that decision. This all came from a guy that you just know is a dog lover and understands what it means to have a pet. And the second one, I'm not as well versed in Supergirl continuity to know how that fits. That, her being a partier and her being the actual companion of Crypto, I don't know. But I'm still willing to let it cook. Even if that's not classic Supergirl, I think we can still see a world where there's a lot of interesting story to be told. Remember, on the other side of the fence, it took 10 years to get to Endgame. It took years to get to Avengers. It took individual storytelling beats to get to the big team ups. So let's let them tell stories. Let's let this story live by itself and then exist in a larger context, because James Gunn is telling individual stories that fit into a larger context. And I think that's exactly what DC needs. I think the time for dark and cynical is over. I know that there are some people that are saying that things go in waves, that some people, because of the nature of where we're at in history right now, people are looking for a cynical take. I argue against that because we've seen the cynical take, and there are tons of people that enjoy the cynical take. But it's time to embrace hope. It's time to embrace virtue. It's time to embrace unity. Not a unity that says we are united because of a country or because of a government, but we are united because humanity inherently has value. People inherently have value. And all of that is exactly why I think this is a tentpole Superman story and gets to sit in the conversation of one of the greatest Superman stories ever told. I came to you all several months ago and said, we need a Superman story that can unite humanity. We need a Superman that is full of hope and virtue. And we got that. Thank you all for joining me. If you enjoyed the movie, let me know down below what your favorite scene was, or if you're going to go and see it, let me know what else you want to hear me talk about down in the comments. Click that bell so that way you don't miss any future uploads. Until next time, peace, geeks.